Hey everyone, it's me again. I'm here to continue Baby Munchkin's delivery story. For this very special week, I am using a kit from HelloPetitePaper. It just matched my pregnancy stickers so well, so I thought this was a super cute kit to choose for this very special week. As mentioned previously, Baby Munchkin came early at 33 weeks, and the week before she arrived, I was just having dinner with family at home when I felt a huge gush of liquid all of a sudden, so I was really worried that my water had broken. I went to check and my underwear was completely soaked. It was not blood, it was just clear liquid, and I'm like 500% sure that I did not pee myself. So I went to the hospital and they were able to find my maternity doctor. So she checked me and she told me that it wasn't amniotic fluid. It was most likely just like discharge that pregnant women get apparently. So she told me to take it easy for the next week. I still felt kind of weird, but I took it easy for the week. And then exactly a week later, I woke up with bleeding. So I called the hospital back and they were like, oh, maybe the cervix is changing and that can cause some bleeding. So they asked me to bed rest for the night and see if the bleeding would stop. Unfortunately, the next day I was still bleeding. So I called them back and they told me that, oh, it sounds kind of serious now. So I should go and see somebody, but they were full. So they actually ended up registering me with another hospital at another city, and they told me to go there instead. Before we left, we had to get my husband's mom to come and take Sophie because she was not house trained to be alone at the time. And it was really nice that she was able to pick up Sophie so that we didn't have to worry about her. And on our way out, like, I had nothing ready, so I literally just grabbed a set of clothes, I grabbed my phone, my charger, and that was pretty much it. We got to the hospital around 1 p.m. and the doctor was not in. There were just nurses, so they hooked me up to the machines and they were able to see that I was having regular contractions every 10 minutes, even though I couldn't feel them. So I don't know why, but I couldn't feel my contractions. But if I put my hand on my tummy, I could definitely feel the contractions. And the nurses told me that she checked my cervix and she told me that my cervix was thinning, but I wasn't dilated, but she wouldn't be able to say anything else until the doctor arrived. At this point, I could kind of tell that her tone was a little weird because I guess the doctor on call is supposed to be on call and, available. But apparently she was working at her own clinic and she didn't come in until 7 hours later. So the nurses didn't seem too happy about that. Obviously, we weren't too happy about that. When she finally arrived at 8 p.m., she didn't even check me. She just looked at the printouts from 7 hours ago that the nurses had, and she basically said that my contractions were not real because I was not feeling pain. She didn't even see if my contractions were getting closer together. She didn't check if I was dilated. And I asked her, I was like, oh, should you check? Is there medication that you can give me to stop the contractions? And she just insisted that they weren't real and that I should just go home and rest. And I felt completely uncomfortable about this. I was speaking to my sister, who's also a doctor, and of course she has OB friends. Everything that I know and I've heard and I've read goes against what this doctor was doing. So I just didn't know what else to do. I've already asked her for medication. I asked if she could check me and she basically refused to and just told us to go home. And I didn't even want to be there at the hospital at that point because I felt like if this was the kind of care that she provided, it's probably good for us to not be there. So we just admitted kind of defeat and we packed up and we left the hospital. And on the way out, she even joked that she's like, oh, well, hopefully we won't see you later tonight. And it was just so uncomfortable. I didn't even know what to say. I was in so much shock from her behavior, which later I found out that she had a whole bunch of malpractice claims against her. So I'm not surprised about that, but it was the worst medical experience I've ever had in my life. I felt so defeated. I felt super unheard, and it just felt like something was wrong. And if I'm bleeding and having regular contractions, she should have looked at me a little more. Anyway, we went to back to my husband's grandma's house to pick up Sophie. His mom had brought her over there because it was her birthday. And then when we got there, we were gonna take Sophie home, but all of a sudden I felt another gush of liquid, went to the washroom to check, and I noticed that it was probably my mucus plug that came out. So I went back out and I told my husband and his mom, and I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure my mucus plug just came out. And as soon as I said that, I felt my water break. So we were like, oh, good thing we hadn't taken Sophie with us at that point. We ended up having to call my original hospital, and I told them that I was not comfortable going back to the one they sent me to. And since we're in a different city as well picking up Sophie, they told me that I could just go to Vancouver's biggest women's hospital, which it was just like really lucky that that actually happened. So I ended up going to Women's Hospital, which is the biggest one in BC, and they're like the most prepared for anything. And when we got there, they checked for contractions. They were still regular, and they were closer, like 7 minutes apart. I still couldn't feel the contraction cramping. They also checked my cervix, and they said that I was still thinning out but not dilated yet, so they wanted to keep me overnight to see how things go. I asked if they could give medications or something to stop the contractions because I knew there were, and baby munchkin was so early, so I have a feeling that maybe the doctor just kind of knew that she was coming and there's no way to really prevent it, but he didn't want to freak me out. So he told me that it's okay, they're just gonna put me on observation for the night. I did get steroid shots and I did get antibiotic shots, and then they sent me to a room to rest. While I was resting, I was supposed to reopen OnceMoreWithLove, like the store, the next day. So I took out my laptop and we were starting to do some work. I was setting up listings for the next day. And then after I think maybe an hour, that's when I realized like I couldn't breathe really well. I didn't really know that it was the contractions that was causing this. I was just heavy breathing, and I had to kind of like stop doing work and breathe through things. And the nurse happened to come in while I was doing that, and she's like, hey, you look pretty uncomfortable. And I was like, yeah, I feel kind of like weird and like I can't breathe properly. My back really hurts. And she was like, oh, well, those are the contractions. So she called the doctor, and she told the doctor that I was looking, just kind of like a lot of discomfort. And the doctor's like, oh yeah, she shouldn't be in that ward to begin with. Like she should have been in the delivery ward, which I guess he didn't make clear earlier. So he's like, yeah, hurry, you should move her. And then I was like, okay, what? Like, I don't know what's happening, but they moved me to the delivery ward. I hadn't finished listings yet, so in between contractions, I was just like working on shop listings. My husband was helping me type while I was telling him what to write, and we literally finished just in time. Right before my contractions got so bad that I couldn't say a word. So I felt all my contractions in my back. I felt nothing in the front, and I guess maybe that's why I couldn't feel them early. It was a full-on back labor. It felt like my back was breaking. It felt like somebody was pushing really, really, really hard on my back. But there was no pain at all on my sides or my front. And it was just like, I don't even know how to describe it. Just a lot of pain in my lower back. And I guess like lower pelvis in the back. Anyway, when the doctors came in again, I was not able to speak really. I was just in a lot of pain. I was pretty much moaning and groaning the whole time. They gave me laughing gas, which didn't help at all. It just dried up my throat and it made me want to throw up. So I asked if there was anything else, and they said, oh yeah, you could get an epidural. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll do that, because it was just super painful, like more than I imagined. And I think if I knew when it would end, I could just, like take the pain. But because this was my first time having a baby, I wasn't sure. I was like, is this gonna go on for like 10 more hours? Because if it was, I don't think I could do that. So I asked if I could get an epidural, and unfortunately the hospital was really busy that night, and they weren't able to get an anesthesiologist in until an hour later, which by then I felt like I was dying. And then when the anesthesiologist came in, she asked me if this is what I wanted. She told me all the risks, and I was like, yeah. But as she was setting up, I felt something change. I felt the baby drop like all the way into my pelvis. And I actually felt her start coming out. So I was telling them, like, she was setting up behind me and she told me that I had to be on my side. I had to lay really still. And in order to do this, the nurse and my husband were told to hold me down. But while they were doing this, I felt the baby start coming out. So I started telling them, I was like, oh my gosh, no, actually I can't. The baby's coming out. But I guess they assumed it was too quick or something. So nobody checked, nobody looked, nobody listened to me. And they basically held me down while she was putting the epidural in. But I was pretty much screaming at them that the baby's coming out. Her head is already out. Like, I could feel it between my legs. I was really upset during all this because it felt like I was being ignored again, even though I was telling them exactly what was happening. And then finally, a nurse from the other side of the room, she took a look and she was like, oh, I can see the head. She really is crowning. And then that's when, like, everybody stopped what they were doing. The two OB doctors rushed in and they were like, oh my gosh, okay, stop pushing. And I was like, I'm not even pushing. She's just coming out. And I guess, like, because she was so small, she came out really fast. They asked me to stop pushing, and I tried to basically just like hold my breath so that nothing would move. And then they're like, okay, now slowly push. And I pushed, I think maybe like twice or 3 times max, and she came out so fast. I had a 2nd-degree tear, which they stitched up. The epidural was so dumb. I basically did not have the epidural for delivery, but I had the epidural for my stitches, so I couldn't feel the stitches when they were stitching me up, but I felt the entire delivery. And I was like, excuse me, I told you guys. And they're like, oh yeah, we didn't think it would be that fast. You were only 5 cm dilated when we checked. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, somebody should have been looking at least, you know. But anyway, I didn't even have just like energy to be more upset at that time. And I was just really happy that the baby was okay and I was fine. And they put her right on me after she was delivered. She was all goopy, but for some reason she smelled like sweet flowers. It was really interesting. And she was so tiny. She was 3.86 pounds. And she was breathing on her own, which was amazing. And at first, I think that's something the doctor's really worried about. So it was nice that she was able to breathe fully on her own. They waited a little bit for us to clamp the cord, and then my husband got to cut it. And everything just looked really good. So they took her for some just like general checks, and they told me that she was doing really well for a premature baby. And then they moved my husband and the baby up to a NICU room while they kept me behind just to check and make sure, I guess, to like clean up the placenta and everything else. So I was able to rejoin them a few hours later. But this whole experience was wild because at first I was expecting to go to a hospital for a checkup. I didn't expect to be sent away, you know, with being completely unheard, and then my water breaking, having to go to a different hospital, and then delivering while having an epidural put in. It was so crazy, like crazier than I ever expected my delivery to be. But at the end of it, I was just like, I'm just grateful everything was okay. We ended up staying in the NICU for 12 days because the baby couldn't, well, they weren't sure, but she had an NG tube for feeding because they wanted to make sure that she was able to get her body weight up, and they didn't even want to kind of like risk breastfeeding or bottle feeding just in case she didn't take it and her body weight would keep dropping, and that apparently wasn't good for her. She had jaundice, so they had to do the phototherapy for about 4 days because I guess she wasn't eating enough or something, but it took a while for her to be able to clear it out of her system. But overall, staying at the NICU was a pretty good experience. The nurses took really good care of us. It was just the delivery that was wild, and you know, at the end of the day, as long as we were safe, that's fine. But the next time this ever happens, or the next time that I'm ever in medical care, I'm for sure speaking up way more for myself. It doesn't matter if I have to scream at somebody. I just feel like this is so much negligence almost. And I understand, like, I know a lot of doctors, I've seen a lot of doctors, and I understand where, you know, doctors do have to have a little bit of like skepticism in terms of, you know, sometimes some people can be really exaggerated, but at the same time, I feel like the level of care that I got was completely lacking. And I want to be able to trust healthcare professionals, but sometimes you just really need to speak up. I felt dismissed every time I brought up concern, and I never felt comfortable. But again, at the end of the day, as long as we're happy, that's pretty much the most important. So we ended up going home after 12 days with the baby in the NICU. We went home as soon as she hit 4 pounds, which was the minimum for the car seat. And it has been mom life ever since. And of course, there are some other struggles that have really affected me postpartum, but I'll save that for a video next time. Thank you so much for following along with my journey. It honestly felt like during this whole time that all of your love and wishes have helped me and the baby get through a lot, because it was just, everything was such a shock. I wasn't prepared. Me and my husband had to kind of sneak out from the NICU when we knew that there was a really good nurse. We would sneak home just to get her crib ready. We would set up her changing station. We had nothing ready, and it was a huge plot twist that she came early. I wasn't prepared. I was hoping, like, I was thinking that I had at least another 1.5 to 2 months left, so I was actually hoping to get more of the shop stuff set up so that when she came, I could just let my manager run everything, but I didn't have time for any of that. So we were just thrown into parenthood, and that's pretty much been it for it. So yeah, thank you so much for watching my video again. I will be back with another Plan With Me video to share some of the experiences that I've had postpartum.